So it's a little bit about me, and I would just love to hear who we have. If we can just do quick introductions, why don't you just, if you can, type into the chat or come off mute and just say your name, your state, and what area you work in. So policy, communications, outreach and campaigns, development, whatever it is. You can either put this in the chat or you can come off of mute and say hi. Devontae and Jacob, do you guys want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Jacob Hill. I am one of the co-chairs of the Outreach and Campaigns Advisory Committee. I am a research and policy analyst at New Mexico Voices for Children. And, but that title, my work really encompasses not just research, but a lot of outreach work and, pretty much everything else. And I am 2 years in the SPP network.
Hey everyone, I'm Devontae Lewis. I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Outreach at the Louisiana Budget Project, and I am the other co-chair of the Outreach and Campaigns Advisory Committee. My role is typically legislative affairs, coalition building, and general outreach, and I do just a tiny bit of policy analysis when it comes to higher ed. And I think that was everything I was supposed to cover. And I have been in the network just over 2 years now. Actually, Jacob and I think we were at New Staff Training together, and that's where we actually first met each other. So comes full circle.
Awesome. Thanks to everyone who's been introducing themselves in the chat. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know your name, your state, and the area of work that you do, whether that's policy, outreach, communications. You can also come off mute and say hi.
Hey, Alicia. Oh, you can see me. Sorry, the camera's not on. Hello. It's Alicia, she, her, hers. And I work at the center, the Deputy Director of State Tax and Budget Campaigns, which just means I get to do a lot of really cool organizing work. And I think, is that it, Deborah?
Yeah, or you want to tell us what state you're in?
Oh, right now, Atlanta, Georgia is where I live, the great dirty South, hot Atlanta. But I'm not from Atlanta, you can tell because I don't have a Southern accent, but I wish I did. But thank you.
Cool. Anyone else want to introduce themselves?
Hi, I am Kirsten Daly, she, her. I am currently in Louisiana working with the Louisiana Budget Project, and I am on the outreach team.
Very cool. All right, last call for folks who want to come off mute and introduce themselves. You can also say hi in the chat. I know it's the end of day 2 of virtual meetings, so Zoom fatigue, Ring Central fatigue is real.
Hi, my name is Salida Soto, and I'm with Alabama Arise. I do hunger advocacy work, which kind of marries
I didn't sign up for this
policy,
session. I'm just creeping in.
as well as a little bit of comms. And I feel like I haven't made it in life until I have a life-size cardboard image of myself like Devontae.
Yes.
True.
Welcome. And that the cardboard cutout of Devontae is always a key participant in all CBPP meetings that Devontae is a part of.
I promise I'm not conceited. It's a long story. I'll fill y'all in later. It's just safer right there than in my house.
Hello, everybody. My name is Monica, and I'm from Mississippi, and I am outreach and campaigns as well.
Awesome. Welcome, Monica. All right, well, folks can continue to say hi in the chat if you haven't done so already, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to this session. Really, the goals of today's session are to introduce these equitable community engagement principles that State Priorities Partnership staff have been working on together with the center staff here. And, you know, we hope that all of you, whatever aspect of work that you do in your organization, if you consider yourself an outreach campaign staffer or not, will really see the principles as relevant to your work, because community engagement is something that touches so many aspects of an organization's work. And then another goal today is to get your feedback on these principles, because, you know, if you've had a chance to look at them so far, and I will go ahead and put a link to the document in the chat, we really see this as an evolving document. It is intentionally titled a working draft, and we want it to be continuing to evolve based on people's perspectives and experiences, based on the work that you all are doing and learning, based on the learning that we're all doing together. You know, I want to say personally for myself that I am trying to approach this work from a place of humility and recognize that, you know, I am certainly not an expert on community engagement, and I'm still learning a lot myself. Many of you that are here today are leading this work way more than I or even some of my colleagues at the center might be. And so really throughout this discussion and afterwards, I want to encourage you to share your thoughts, share your perspective, push us on where and how we can be better. I mean, even just in the introductions, I heard we have folks from One Voice Mississippi and Alabama Arise, which, you know, community engagement has been core to your work for a long time, as well as other organizations here that are, you know, have been incorporating community engagement into your work as an SPP organization for some time. So I just want to start by giving a little bit of an introduction to, like, where do these principles come from, what they are and what they aren't. Want to also invite Jacob and Devante if there's anything you guys want to add that you think is important context. And then what we're going to do is, assuming I can get the technology to work, we're going to go into breakout rooms where you're going to have a chance to discuss with one other person, you know, your thoughts on the principles, what stands out to you, how you might think about applying them to your work, and then we'll come back together. And if the technology fails me, we'll find a way to just do that all together. So to start, you know, what a little bit of background about, like, where these principles came from, and some of this is in the document if you already read it, but, you know, as you've hopefully learned throughout this 2-day session and throughout your time at your organization so far, you know, State Priorities Partnership organizations have long been engaged in policy research and analysis, communications, coalition building, and issue advocacy, but it's really been in the last few years that organizations in the network have been doing more work that falls under community engagement. And I think there's lots of different definitions of what that is. We include a definition in the principles document, but, you know, some of the things that groups have been doing are holding listening sessions across the state with people who experience poverty, homelessness, or other challenges, collecting stories from people with lived experiences and finding ways to use those stories in advocacy and media work, and entering into different kinds of partnerships with more grassroots oriented and community-based organizations. And so as this trend has really been happening across the network, I think for SPP outreach and campaign staff in particular, so the people who tend to be doing this work, and also many of whom increasingly come from an organizing background, we're noticing that that sometimes in our zeal to incorporate community engagement into our work, we haven't always thoughtfully considered how to do that in the most equitable way possible. So sometimes we have actually perpetuated the cycle of harm, which is really the opposite of what we should be doing in terms of being extractive of people's time, energy, and resources, and you know, sometimes viewed community engagement as more of a box to be checked than a holistic commitment and approach. And so the outreach and campaign staff in the network gathers once a year before the annual Impact Conference to learn from each other, to do some, you know, skill building and community building together. And so when the outreach and campaign staff gathered last year in December 2019, we decided to focus on this topic of equitable community engagement for the entire day of the convening. And the nearly 40 staff who attended that convening developed these principles through a really iterative process. And then the Outreach Advisory Committee, which Devontae and Jacob co-lead, and us here at the Center on Budget, built those principles out into the document that you see today. So I am also going to just pull up the principles in a really simple slide that I made, just to have a way to see them without all the explanatory stuff that we have here. And I want to give folks a moment just to read the principles themselves. But first, some like overarching caveats, I guess I would say, is that one, and this is in the document as well, these are meant to be the floor and not the ceiling. The idea is that this is like a baseline set of principles that we in the State Priorities Partnership would like to hold ourselves to, and hopefully groups will be going above and beyond this, especially as they start to really internalize these principles and really integrate them into their work. And the other thing that we really try to make clear in the document is that these principles are, it can be a great written document, but it's nothing if not applied, and it's nothing if your organization is not also engaging in the broader racial equity work to dismantle white supremacy in your organization, to be more anti-racist in the ways that you work in your organization with our other partners, in the policies that you pursue, that it sort of like this isn't just something you can check the box and not do the other work. So with that, I want to give folks just a couple minute to like read just the 9 principles that are right here. And then Jacob and Devontae, I want to ask if there's anything you want to add.
After people read it or right now?
What, you go ahead and add it now, and then folks can read. Yeah.
I mean, that was a really good summary. I think what those conversations last year at the before Impact, when we had our outreach and advisory committee or outreach day, it was a pretty diverse group in terms of what people's roles are in their organizations and in their states. And so I think these principles really reflect a lot of really good dialogue. Like, it wasn't just like sort of a straightforward brainstorming. It really was like sharing stories, sharing experiences, the perspectives of people who are, just straight up outreach staff, some who are analysts, some who, more legislative and campaigns, but really centered in a value for racial equity, but and like interrogating, like, what does that mean? What does that actually mean in our work? And how can we really critique ourselves and make sure that we are, that we're centering the experiences and the leadership and the power of the people that we claim to work on behalf of. Sorry about the background noise.
Yeah, I think Jacob and Deborah have hit kind of where we are and what we did, and part of our philosophy of what we were talking about to center kind of what we mean when we were talking about a community engagement is also focusing on policy wins. That oftentimes we win great policies for impacted communities, but oftentimes we don't reflect on how we've engaged with them before that win, and how did we convey the win back to them? Because what is a policy win if the people we want it for have no idea that it actually exists or has bettered their lives? And so we really wanted to center how do we break the traditional model of policy think tanks. I mean, most of the time it used to be a 30-page report, feed it out to a few reporters, and then you called it a day. And so if we are really interested in this, changing policies, improving people's lives, that we have to actually engage with and speak to the people that we were talking about. And I'll kind of end in basically saying I'm a big believer that nonprofits, especially policy nonprofits, have to get out of a savior mentality and get into a servant mentality, that we are not here to save a group of people or a vulnerable population, but we're here to serve them. And our policies help serve and make their lives better, which means we have to engage with them. So we don't seem like we're just coming in and doing what we wanted to do. And so we spent a lot of time talking about these. Deborah made it very clear there's still conversations going, but that was kind of the framework and the guiding principles we use to really make these principles.
So yeah, I unfortunately, while I have my screen shared, I cannot see the chat. So I'm gonna leave these on the screen for a few more seconds here, and then stop the share so that I can see if there are any comments or questions in the chat. I want to also just give people a space to ask questions before we go into the breakout group. So take a minute to read, and then I'll stop the share.
Yeah, there aren't currently any questions or comments.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right. So does anybody have any questions about the principles before we get into our breakout groups? And I'll explain what we'll do in the breakout rooms in a little bit. All right. So as I said at the beginning, the caveat here is that I have never actually set up breakout rooms in Ring Central, so I'm going to do my best. But if the technology doesn't work, then we can just have this as a full group discussion. But what I'd like to do is to put people in pairs, and you can look at the principles together. And I have 4 discussion questions, but you do not have to do all 4 of them. You should do whichever one in your group really speaks to you. As many of them as you get to, even if there's just one, or if you guys go in a different direction, that's fine too. So the questions are going to be, and they'll be in the chat, which of these principles resonates with you or stands out to you, and why? And you can take that in whatever direction you want, you know, based on your past experience, based on something that you see your organization doing or not doing, just anything that's standing out to you or resonating with you. Is there anything that you feel is missing from this document or could be strengthened or otherwise changed? Another direction you could go in is to think about a situation or a project that you're currently facing in your work, and digging into, you know, is community engagement currently a part of that? If not, could it be, should it be? And if so, how would you apply one of these principles to that project? And then also, what supports or resources do you need, whether from the center staff or from the Outreach Advisory Committee, to apply these principles to your work? So again, these 4 questions are just a suggestion of where your conversation might go. You don't have to do all 4 of them. Your conversation goes in a different direction about the principles. That is totally fine too. And then we'll come back together and have each group just share their takeaways. But I'm going to go ahead and try to put folks in breakout rooms now. Hi. Hi, Lolita. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, I can.
Hi, welcome. So people are in breakout rooms right now. I can put you in a breakout room if you don't mind joining a discussion. The discussions have been going for
Oh,
about
yes,
6 or 7
that's what I
minutes.
was actually looking for. So
Yeah, I can
I
put you
can.
in a breakout room. Hold on one moment. Here we go. All right, should have gotten an invitation to go to a breakout room.
Okay.
everyone. I feel like my first time using breakout rooms was successful. The only problem is I think whoever watches this recording, because the breakout rooms don't get recorded, whoever watches this recording is basically just gonna like watch me stare at myself in the screen for 15 minutes.
Hello.
Hello, welcome back.
You done snatched me right out of that room, huh?
I know, well, I didn't do it. I just pressed a button and somebody else did that. I know, I've been on the other side of that. And like when that counter starts, like it is serious. It does not care if you are in the middle of a sentence. So welcome back to the main session room, as Ring Central likes to call it. I am really eager to hear what folks talked about because I've just spent the last 15 minutes looking at myself in the screen. But I would be eager to hear anyways. So I don't know if anybody wants to share any of the takeaways or themes from your discussion. Again, you don't have to answer one of the questions specifically, just what are the things that came up in your group that you want to share with everyone here?
I can go. So Danielle was in my breakout group as well and brought up it's important to like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Danielle, shout out to you, but that it was important to kind of define and really structure like what centering a targeted group looks like in a campaign. And as I was snatched from the breakout room, I was saying that I think that it's important to be really explicit in that language. I think that we often like shy away from using more explicit language, but if we're working on a project where we're trying to center like queer and trans and non-conforming people, then like part of centering them is having them very explicitly head up that project. Like it should be not at cis people's discretion. It should not be at white people's discretion. It should not be at straight people's discretion. How that project is run, how the meetings are run, what the objectives look like, all of that should really come from the community that we're talking about so that our programs and our projects are the most effective possible. And like maybe it doesn't sound as nice to be like, we don't want to have cis people on the executive team for this project, or we don't want white people to be on the executive team for this project, but like that is really unapologetic centering of the targeted group, and I think that is really important to be explicit about.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I feel like it's at that first principle too about centering people and being honest about when we have not done that, because if these principles are going to, change the way that we do our work, like let's acknowledge that that's a change and that change is coming because we haven't always done that. And especially people that we're working with are probably going to remember that. We got the plant game, now we got the fan game. This is great.
I had to turn off my AC because it was leaking,
Oh, no.
so now I'm hot.
Oh gosh, no AC in Louisiana in September. Folks have other takeaways they want to share from their discussion?
I was with Zamora and the young woman from Mississippi, and two things that we kind of talked about and dug into were, one, like what does like storytelling engagement look like? Like, yes, pay the people, but like I said, I think there's a principle that I want to start at my organization, which is I can pay you, you can show up, you can do a testimony, we can share the story in our reports or with the press. But what is my relationship with you after? And making sure someone is responsible to report back to that person or give them that engagement to see and follow us through this, which then builds that trust, and then they'll go out and be social advocates within the community. because I think that's where sometimes it stops, is that we're like in session and it's amazing, but we're not continually, intentionally building on these relationships in some way, in some form. So that's one. And then the other was like, I saw some, I was like, one of the things I would love to see is the word intentional implementation as like number 10. Yes, because these feel like suggestions, but to like end it and say, take all this and find a way to implement this, and we'll give you guys a mentor or some case studies of how this worked. Because I'm new, a lot of folks are new, some folks are new to this, I don't want to say industry, but like community of like work. We don't want them to lose that if they leave their org. Like that we don't want that to leave with their organization, right? So we want it like kind of like embed it and get it and bake it in somehow, some way.
Yeah. So thank you for all of that, and especially the specific suggestions of like, you know, maybe some opportunities for like mentorship, you know, or like learning from others who have done this, and case studies also. Could definitely look into those. Did anybody have a situation that they brought up in their group of like a project that you're currently working on or that you're going to be working on, and, you know, kind of thought about how community engagement either is currently a part of that project or isn't, but could be, and what the principles could look like in that? All right. Well, we can just, if first of all, if somebody wants to like throw out a situation now, we could all work on it together, or we can just continue with other takeaways, reactions, feedback, thoughts that people have. There's a couple of groups we haven't heard from yet if folks want to chime in.
So are you asking about any community engagement that we're involved in right now within our organizations, or is this something from the breakout rooms? Just getting clarity.
Oh, yeah, it could be either. You know, if it was one of the questions for the breakout rooms was, you know, if you wanted to talk about something that you're currently doing, and how the principles are showing up in that work or could be showing up in that work, but also just wanted to, you know, even if you didn't get to that in your breakout room, but you want to bring that into this space here all together, definitely welcome that.
So I wasn't here at the beginning of the session. I apologize for that. But one of the things that we're doing within some of our communities here is starting like election protection, which actually engages communities across the state. And so it's difficult at times to gather or galvanize people to motivate them to move. So I'll bring that into the space.
Thank you. Could you say a little bit more about what the election protection work looks like? Like how, it sounds like you are experiencing some challenges, but how are you guys approaching it right now?
Well, with the election protection laws being, or the laws being the way that they are, no early voting and that type of stuff, our people are encountering a lot of issues with voter IDs, them changing laws and this whole COVID reality and us having to wear masks and those types of things. So if people are experiencing issues with getting absentee voting ballots and those types of things, then we have boots on the ground or trying to galvanize people on the ground to help to combat those issues. And so you'll always have those people who are allies, but you encounter a lot of people who are actually working against you in those communities as well to get that done and get as many people to the ballot box as possible.
Mm-hmm. Are any folks on the call doing similar work or maybe have done this work in the past and have thoughts on this? I think the 5 o'clock on day 2 of a virtual training is getting to folks. Well, Lolita, thank you so much for bringing that into this space. And I would encourage you to post about that to the loop as well. And if you're not signed up on the loop yet, we can get you set up and maybe somebody who's not at this training can respond there. We do have something from Heather in the chat. Saying that something that's resonated is the mention of taking conflict in stride. As professionals and as a society, we tend to pursue perfection when mistakes actually help inform and produce positive outcomes. So mentioning mistakes and hiccups and focusing on how they're actually integral to eventual success is really meaningful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I think there's two things here, like there's conflict and there's mistakes, and both of them are essential and happen all the time and are not something to be afraid of. I know that's certainly an area of learning for me, particularly around conflict. And that's really the intent behind this principle here about embracing conflict, because it is natural and it is an area of growth. And if conflict is happening, there's something important there. And so if you shy away from it or intentionally avoid it, or avoid situations where you think conflict might arise, you're actually, sort of avoiding the work that needs to be done. And then, of course, mistakes as learning opportunities, and perfectionism is not the goal, because perfectionism is not real. Nothing is ever perfect. Anyone want to share any final thoughts, takeaways, feedback, suggestions? This is not the only space to ever do that, but want to give you a chance to share what's on your mind. All right. Well, I just want to say thanks to everybody for being here, not just in this workshop, but being throughout this entire training, which is coming to a close. I hope that this is just the start of a conversation among all of you who are at new staff training, in your organizations, as you bring these principles back to your organization and share your reflections from this training, and across the network. I know Devontae and Jacob and the rest of the Outreach Advisory Committee are particularly interested in having this conversation across the network. So I hope you will keep an eye out on the loop for opportunities to talk with staff around the country about the principles. just again want to thank you for your time and for everything that you're doing. Unfortunately, I do not have another DJ break to release you to. Those are done for the day, but we do have a closing from Taifa Butler, who is the head of the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute, and I believe the chair of the SPP steering committee. And you are not going to want to miss that. So I will let you have a couple of minutes to stretch, to find where exactly that session lives in the Hoover app. But check it out, and then I hope that you have a good, restful night and week ahead of you. Thanks all.